All right, this is where to start with plain language. I'm Audrey Homan, and you can find the materials for this presentation at go.uvm.edu/accessibility, including these materials as a PDF and this screencast with transcript. So today we're going to go over three things. One, what is plain language? Two, why use plain language? And then we're going to go over a plain language activity. So before we start any of this, we're going to talk about how 67% of accessibility failures come down to design choices. I mentioned this statistic a number of times in other presentations, and when you are choosing what language to lay things out in, your manuals, your how-to manuals, your annual reports, your web pages, your blog posts, you're making choices about the language you use. And here we are looking at 67% of accessibility failures come down to design choices. Now, according to AUCD.org, that's the Association of University Centers for Disability, plain language is quote unquote clear, straightforward, and only uses words necessary to make sure all people can understand and participate. From the AUCD Plain Language Toolkit, as well as materials put out by a group called SARTAC, that's the Self Advocates Resources and Technical Assistance Center, come up with 5 elements of plain language. 1 is active voice. 2 is that the materials are at a 6th grade reading level. 3 is that it uses simple, familiar language. 4, there are fewer acronyms than normal. And 5, words are of 3 syllables or less. Other ways you can support plain language come down to format or graphic design. That is, you can provide both text and audio versions. We have had a lot of feedback from people, especially people who are neurodiverse, people on the autism spectrum, who really appreciate having an audio version of materials to listen to. Really prefer to listen to materials rather than read them. You can provide a glossary of all of the terms that are maybe more than 3 syllables, or that are terms that are not familiar. They are ones that are specific to your industry or your profession, almost your jargon, but you need to make sure that that glossary is itself in plain language. You can create and offer 2 versions of whatever you're making. You can write the version you're comfortable with, that you feel most speaks to what you want to get across to your audience, and then go through and make a second version that is plain language. You can also create shorter paragraphs and include more white space, and you can include headings so that people are more easily able to skim through what you've created. Now, CDCI knows that all of this is a lot, and so right now we are asking that folks focus on these 3 most important aspects of plain language. 1, active voice. 2, creating shorter sentences. And 3, keeping it at or below a 6th grade reading level. Certainly nothing above a 6th grade reading level. Let's go through what each of those 3 items are. Now, active voice. That is when the activity takes place in the sentence. It is not passive voice. So, passive voice would be, the cake was eaten. You don't know who ate the cake. But the active voice version of that sentence is, we ate the cake. Right there you know who did the action in the sentence. We did the action in the sentence. The activity was eating. The object was the cake. We ate the cake. That's active voice. You want to go for shorter sentences. SARTAC advises no more than 15 to 20 words per sentence. I think that's pretty generous. But instead of having a sentence such as, quote unquote, it's exciting to present these cakes to you as triumphs of the art of baking, the spirit of baking, and the joy of eating cakes of all shapes, flavors, and compositions. That, friends, is a very long sentence. It is easily more than 20 words long. So let's break it into shorter sentences. So our plain language version might be, it's exciting to present these cakes to you. They are triumphs of the art of baking. They are triumphs of the spirit of baking. And we hope everyone enjoys cakes of all kinds. Now, when we go through these exercises and we look at ways to create plain language, realize there's a number of different ways to go about making something plain language. There's no one right answer. This is simply the answer I came up with this hypothetical of making shorter sentences out of one very long one. When you consider the very long sentence, it's exciting to present these cakes to you as triumphs of the art of baking, the spirit of baking, and the joy of eating cakes of all shapes, flavors, and compositions. How many sentences would you create out of that? How many shorter sentences would you make? I made 3. Would you have made more? Would you have kept some of the words in? Would you have changed any of the words? Now, let's talk about the 6th grade reading level. Meet Readable.com. Readable.com is a website that actually allows you to test the readability of what you are working on, and it makes suggestions for how to improve the readability. Now, you can copy and paste your document or simply a passage into the website, and it's going to give you a number of different information about it. One is the readability grade level. That is what you're looking for in this particular instance. Now, I have on screen a screenshot of Readable.com in action, and it is working with the sample text that Readable.com provides for you to go through. And it's showing, I have it circled in orange, that it's showing you that the grade level readability right now is 8, meaning it's 8th grade readable. So, or readable by 8th graders. That would be the active voice version of that. Practicing what we preach. So we know that if this is a real text that we're working on, we need to think about simplifying it. We need to think about making it plainer language. And in the screenshot, you see that one of the pieces of the text that's highlighted has a note next to it that says, long sentence. This sentence is long. Consider rewriting it to be shorter. So Readable will go through and make suggestions to you to help you get to a plain language place. You can also, it'll also tell you your word count, your sentence count, your paragraph count. It'll give you a readability score on the Flesch Reading Ease Index, if that is your preference. But for our purposes, Readable.com will score what text you give it and tell you what the perceived grade level is, so that you can try and hit that 6th grade reading level. Now, why are we doing this? Why are we trying to write in plain language? We're trying to write in plain language because we are writing for people with permanent disabilities, people with temporary disabilities, and people with situational disabilities. Let's go over what all of those mean once again. So, people with permanent disabilities, someone might have a permanent cognitive or intellectual disability that makes it really difficult for them to read text, read and understand text. This encompasses all of developmental disabilities, but there are a wide variety that are permanent. You might also have somebody who has a temporary disability. So, for instance, in this case, something that would affect reading ability would be if somebody's recovering from a concussion. Ideally, they're going to recover all the way from that concussion, but they're having that period right after a concussion where it's a little harder to read than it might have been before they sustained the injury. And we're writing for people with situational disabilities. If you're really busy and you're trying to make dinner and get through this presentation before you sit down to actually do plain language tomorrow, you're maybe listening to it, or you're trying to skim it really fast while doing 3 other things. You're in a situational disability. Your attention is being pulled in a different direction. But plain language also makes reading easier for people who have reading difficulties, such as dyslexia, people who are learning English, people who are translating your work into a different language, and again, people who are super, super busy. If nothing else, plain language makes your work objectively easier to read. And when it's easier to read, more people are likely to spend time on it. There's so many different things out there competing for our attention. And you're trying to get people to get interested in your event, the description of your event or description of your podcast episode. And you're competing with all the other things out there, especially on the internet. Maybe you've got family obligations, a friend is texting them with a crisis, the dog is barking. You are trying to get and stay in front of people. And if your work is easier to read, they're much more likely to make that half second to get all the way through it and maybe click register for the event or download for the podcast episode. So now we're going to do a plain language exercise. If we are working in a big group, this is where we would break into groups, but you, if you are listening solo, can do this by yourself. You're a group of 1. Now, we're going to go through sample paragraphs taken directly from a published book, journal, or website, and I want you to take 15 minutes to edit the passage and make it plain language. So we're going to start off with all of these readily available items on the internet that are not plain language potentially. And we're going to think about ways we would edit them to make them plainer language. Now, 6 items available. 1 is a news article about Oklahoma City titled "Hefty Fines for Endangering Roadside Emergency Workers Set to Take Effect in November." That is from the MicrosoftNews.com website. The second is a passage from the book "Turn On, Tune In, Drift Off: Ambient Music's Psychedelic Past" by Victor Szabo. Number 3 is an article from People.com titled "House of Kardashian: Find out when the docuseries featuring Caitlyn Jenner is streaming in the US." Number 4 is a professional website of accessibility resources. The International Accessibility Association has an educational training database, and we're going to look at some of the ways they describe their resources. Number 5 is a description of a podcast. It is the podcast War on Cars, and it is the description of episode 109, Inclusive Transportation with Veronica O. Davis. And item number 6 is an article from the academic journal Gastronomica, the journal for food studies. Now, let's go through them one by one. Let's start with the news article from MicrosoftNews.com, MSN.com. So the article is about Oklahoma City, and the title is "Hefty Fines for Endangering Roadside Emergency Workers Set to Take Effect in November." Here's the passage I want you to consider. Is this plain language? If it's not, how would you make it plainer language? Quote unquote. If the law itself doesn't catch your attention, then maybe the fine that you have to pay if you're found guilty of failing to slow down or move over will. Starting November 1, if a person is found guilty of endangering an emergency worker on the roadways, they can face fines of $1,000 for their first offense. The $1,000 fine is a significant hike from the current fine, which is only $250. The fines only become more costly for repeat offenders, with the fine being $2,500 for the second offense. End quote. Go ahead and pause this presentation, pause this recording, and think about ways you might make that passage plainer language. Okay, come on back. I'm trusting you all to do your own pausing, be in charge of your own pausing and restarting. So when I look at this passage, when I consider this passage, I think that the author, who is Grant Palmer, has done a great job of shorter sentences. There's not a lot of long sentences here. I think I would probably improve some of the word choices. So, do we know what endangering an emergency worker looks like? So, going back to elements of plain language, no words of more than 3 syllables. Endangering is 4. So, might want to think about if you're found guilty of hurting an emergency worker or hitting an emergency worker, if you're found guilty of harming an emergency worker. I'm not sure we're all in agree on what a roadway is or why we need to talk about roadways instead of roads. So I'd probably change that word. And do we want to go with significant? There's probably a more familiar word to choose there. What about the $1,000 fine is a big hike from the current fine, which is only $250. And then maybe more costly. So the last sentence is the fines only become more costly for repeat offenders, with the fine being $2,500 for the second offense. Okay, I'd break it into 2 sentences. And the first sentence I would probably rewrite as, the fines get more expensive each time you do them. The second offense is $2,500. What did you come up with in terms of plain language? I think this article, and there's a link here in the slides, so you want to go visit the article. The article's pretty well written in terms of plain language. This makes sense because newspapers are generally going to be written for a vast, wide audience of people, and they want to try to capture make it accessible for as many folks as possible. So they're really trying to go with plain language. Number 2, our non-fiction book, Turn On, Tune In, Drift Off, Ambient Music's Psychedelic Past by Victor Szabo. Okay, this is a passage from the introduction. Ambient music, while appearing in name to be an asocial and supra-stylistic art form, was in truth a socially savvy stylization of the intoxicating, affective, and embodied pleasures of psychedelic drone and loop-based atmospheric audio for a presumptively white, hip, and high middle-brow market. End quote. Go ahead and take some time with that. I certainly have. That's a hard one to make plain language. This is a book. You would think that everybody should be able to access the history of ambient music, but this book is written in a really high, complicated style. So what have we got here? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 42, 43 words in one sentence. So not a shorter sentence. We know we're going to need several sentences to get through that. And there is a lot of jargon there. I think what I would do, the way I would start with this sentence, if I was trying to create some plain language space here, is I would start with a glossary. This book needs a glossary. You're going to define ambient music. You're going to define supra-stylistic. You're going to define psychedelic drone, loop-based atmospheric audio. Define atmospheric audio. Define high middle brow. Start there. This is an active voice sentence, but these are really hard words. I'm a fan of ambient music. I'm a big fan, and I don't know what this sentence actually means. So some work there. Number 3, this is an entertainment article. It's from people.com. House of Kardashian. Find out when the docuseries featuring Caitlyn Jenner is streaming in the US. This is a piece by Gillian Telling. All right, here we go. This is the text that you're going to pause and try and rewrite. Quote unquote, the latest docuseries about America's most famous family is coming to the US. People can exclusively reveal that House of Kardashian, the 3-part series that's currently airing in the UK and includes never-before-seen archival footage and interviews with family insiders, will air exclusively on Peacock beginning November 16th. While the immediate family, including Kris Jenner, Kim Kardashian, Kourtney Kardashian Barker, Khloe Kardashian, Rob Kardashian, Kendall Jenner, and Kylie Jenner, declined to participate in the series, Caitlyn Jenner is featured prominently, as are other family insiders, including Kim's former friend Rachel Sterling. Pause and reflect. Okay. So, I don't think we need a glossary here, but I do think we need much shorter sentences, and I think we can do a little bit of work with the word choice. So, let's start with the first sentence. The latest docuseries about America's most famous family is coming to the US. Docuseries? No. How about television show? The latest television show about, I would just say about the Kardashians is coming to the US. It's weird because people then talks about itself in the third person. One of the things you want to think about with plain language is sticking with you and we. You're talking directly to someone. You're in a conversation with them, and you don't usually talk about yourself in the third person. So, let's see. Next sentence is, people can exclusively reveal that House of Kardashian, the 3-part series, is currently airing in the UK. Okay, pause. We want to tell you that House of Kardashian is a 3-part television series currently airing in the United Kingdom. Stop. Next sentence. The show includes never before seen footage. Do we want to go with footage? Do we want to go with something else? The show includes never before seen footage and interviews with family insiders. Stop. The show will air exclusively on Peacock beginning November 16th. Okay, we're almost there. Now we're down to this bad boy. While the immediate family, including Kris Jenner, Kim Jenner, declined to participate in this series, Caitlyn Jenner is featured prominently, as are other family insiders, including Kim's former friend Rachel Sterling. All right, that is one honkin' big sentence. Let's chop it up. The immediate family of Kardashians declined to participate in this series. This included Kris Jenner, Kim Kardashian, Kourtney Kardashian Barker, Khloe Kardashian, Rob Kardashian, Kendall Jenner, and Kylie Jenner. None of them participated in the series. At the same time, the series features Caitlyn Jenner and Kim Kardashian's former friend Rachel Sterling. Boom. Done. So, what do? We chopped up the sentences into smaller sentences. We looked at who the point of view was, not using third person to talk about ourselves, but instead saying first person plural. We can reveal this. We made a list. We included a list instead of in the text right now. It just has M dashes and then the list is embedded in the sentence. I would make a standalone bulleted list that's easier to scan. And we made it four sentences, that last one. So even though People.com is a widely read magazine that should be appealing to as many people as possible, as many different reading grade levels, that needed some work. Number 4, an accessibility resource website, the IAAP's Educational Training Database. We're taking 2 summaries of 2 items in the database from the front page. Here we go. Quote unquote, the resources on the Accessibility Switchboard portal are designed to include actionable intelligence that is based on proven success stories, case studies, in parentheses, provided by the community of practice members and related initiatives. The guides build on past work in the field of access to technology by including pointers to existing books, websites, webinars, online training courses, and other resources. G3ICT has developed their new information portal for the public procurement of accessible information and communication technology, ICT. The new portal features curated resources as well as news and blog articles on the topic of public procurement and digital inclusion. Okay, I'm only going to do one of these. You can decide to do the other one, but I'm gonna work with that second one for a moment. It's the G3ICT. So let's take that sentence again. I guess it's 2 sentences. G3ICT has developed their new information portal for the public procurement of accessible information and communication technology, ICT. All right, stop. G3ICT has developed a new website. What's public procurement? Procurement is a 3-syllable word, but I'm not sure that it is very simple or familiar. So I would think about purchasing. There you go. G3ICT has developed a new website for people in public purchasing. It's public purchasing. For people doing purchasing for public entities, public organizations. G3ICT has developed their new website for people doing public purchasing. G3ICT has developed a new website for people and organizations buying accessible information and communication technology. Ooh, there we go. The new website, not portal, features resources, news, and blog articles on buying for public organizations and digital inclusion. I think we're close. We're getting closer. Tackle the other one in this section and let me know how far you get. Number 5, podcast episode description. This is from the War on Cars podcast. This is episode 109 on inclusive transportation by Veronica O. Davis. So, quote unquote, in her new book, Inclusive Transportation, a Manifesto for Repairing Divided Communities, Veronica O. Davis, the Director of Transportation and Drainage Operations for the City of Houston, Texas, takes a hard look at the ways in which planning a world for cars has harmed communities and how that affects anyone working to change things today. How do you repair a system that continues to divide communities? In a world where quote-unquote equity can sometimes just be a buzzword, what does equity truly look like if we can achieve it? All right, let's just pause there. There's another paragraph. I'll give you the other paragraph so you can work on it on your own time. Davis tells her own quote-unquote transportation story and asks readers to think about their own, and urges transportation professionals to consider past injustices and do the hard work that results in more than an idea and a catchphrase. She also has a lot of advice for how to approach community engagement and the different types of quote-unquote stakeholders who can make or break a street improvement project. Hey, that second paragraph's not bad. I would chop it up into smaller sentences, but it's pretty active. Davis tells her own story. She asks readers to think about their own. Davis urges transportation professionals. I'd probably break it into 3 sentences there. Or a bulleted list of 3 things. Davis tells her own story, asks readers to think about their transportation story, and urges transportation professionals to consider past injustices. She also asks those professionals to think about what it takes. Then we get into like rewriting people's stuff. You don't want to actually rewrite people's stuff. But again, all these small changes are going to add up as you make language plainer. There's no one correct answer. It's just how can you make it plainer? How can you make it more accessible? Remember, accessibility is a journey. And finally, we have the academic journal Gastronomica. In fact, we have the spring 2023 issue of the academic journal Gastronomica, the Journal for Food Studies. This is by Jillian R. Kavanaugh from her article Authenticity and Its Perils. Who is left out when food is quote-unquote authentic? Here we go, y'all. This article focuses on absence and exclusion within heritage food making in northern Italy. Okay, so far, pretty good. These absences and exclusions are structured by race and gender inequalities and not incidental to heritage food making, but built into it. I argue for an understanding of heritage foods as what Anna Lowenhaupt Singh, 2015, has called quote-unquote capitalist ruins, or that which is left behind when capitalist structures and forms recede from particular landscapes and sites, leaving people to piece together livelihoods in the aftermath. To do this, I draw from my long-term ethnographic and linguistic anthropological research with heritage food makers in northern Italy who primarily create various types of meat-based products like salamis and sausages. The local concept of quote-unquote nostrano, otherwise known as our local, generates a type of authenticity that is also a chronotope, or a fusion of notions of time and space, which is key to how exclusions and absences are structured. Holy guacamole. Okay. First off, glossary. Right off the bat. All of these words, if you're going to keep them, sometimes jargon is necessary to explain what it is you do. Maybe the thing you do is really, really specific, and you need your jargon to be able to explain really specifically what you do. Okay, in that case, you need a glossary. So I would probably dump into that glossary heritage food making, capitalist ruins, linguistic anthropological research, ethnographic research, chronotope, definitely. But I'd also go through and make much shorter sentences, and I would get all of this passage into active voice. The beginning of the passage does a great job. This article focuses on a thing. And then it just goes back to passive. These absences and exclusions are structured by are structured by race and gender. Who is structuring those? Who is structuring the absences and exclusions by race and gender? Okay. So, as you went through all of those exercises, what did you notice? And what did you wonder? See, these are always two good questions to ask yourself when you're doing a wide variety of activities. But I think when you're looking at across lots of different types of things and trying to find places where things they have in common, it's good to ask yourself, what did you notice? And what did you wonder? Plus, there's homework. All right. So after you get done watching and listening to this piece of media, this webinar, this screencast, I want you to think about one piece of media you really like. It can be a book, it can be a podcast, it can be a website, maybe a blog you really like, a newspaper, an academic journal, one piece of media you really like. And I want you to think about the elements of plain language. Is it plain language? Now, I do my own homework. So I am thinking about the podcast Criminal. If you're not familiar with it, it's a true crime podcast, no judgment, a true crime podcast that focuses on people behind crimes. And one episode in particular that I enjoyed is called The Paramedics. It's episode number 222. It's from June of 2023. And I have a screenshot here from the Criminal website showing the description of the transcript for the episode of The Paramedics. And the description reads, as recently as 1965, if you had a medical emergency, the people who showed up at your door would be volunteer firefighters, police officers, or undertakers with a hearse. Today, the story of how a group of black men from Pittsburgh changed that. Okay, fairly straightforward. That first sentence is a little long. And so what I noticed was, as I listened to the episode, one of the things that the host of Criminal does is that all the episodes feature interviews with different people who are connected with one particular, crime or situation. And Phoebe Judge, who is the host of Criminal, leans in and restates sometimes what they're saying in plain language, or she provides context for the stories they're telling in plain language. So, for instance, from the transcript from the Paramedics episode, we have John Moon, who was a paramedic back in 1965, and one of the men from Pittsburgh who became some of the first paramedics, black paramedics, first paramedics in this country. John Moon says, "Believe it or not, when I finished high school, I wanted to be a police officer. I had no idea on how to pursue that goal because at the time, individuals that looked like me were not really noticeable on the police force at that time." And Phoebe Judge says, John Moon grew up in Pittsburgh in the 1960s in a predominantly black neighborhood called the Hill District. At one time, it was the home of the nation's largest black newspaper, had jazz clubs where Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong performed, and had its own baseball team. But by the time John graduated from high school, things had changed. And then we're back to John Moon. The businesses dissolved, and the community itself from my opinion, became one of neglect and underserved, and there was a lack of jobs, a lot of unemployment. And then we're back to Phoebe. John says that sometimes people who lived in the Hill District were called unemployables. John found a job working at a hospital. That, friends, is really plain language. Like, Phoebe Judge is very gently moving the story along by providing context in plain language. And I think that's one of the reasons I like the podcast so much. I find it really easy to listen to when I'm doing 100 other things. Anyway, for your homework, think about your own piece of media that you've chosen and ask yourself 2 questions. 1, is it plain language? And 2, would you recommend it to a friend who you know has a cognitive disability? Now, there are no wrong answers here. Remember, accessibility is a journey. We're all trying to do our best. If we're not getting to plain language, we're at least getting to plainer language. Let me tell you a story. So, Criminal, the podcast, I really enjoy it. And I happened to recommend it to a friend of mine who suffered a traumatic brain injury. And I thought she might like it. It's the type of thing she likes. And so I asked her if she thought it was plain language. And she told me that in her opinion, it is plain language. It's easy for her to follow. But episodes of Criminal have background music running underneath when Phoebe Judge and her guests are talking. And my friend found that really distracting from when she was trying to follow along with what those people were saying. So again, it's all very, very complicated. You can have plain language, but maybe if you put background music underneath, that's going to complicate things. So I've got some plain language resources in the PDF and in the description to this video: the AUCD Language Access Plan, the Self-Advocacy Resources and Technical Assistance Center Plain Language Formats, the ABCs of Plain Language from the University of Kentucky, which is a fabulous resource that gets really deeply into plain language, and of course a link to readable.com so that you can score your own plain language attempts. And finally, here's 4 for the door. 1, resist the freak out. Accessibility is hard and it's a process. Accessibility is a process and it's a journey. We're all just doing the best we can. You did really great for sitting through this entire presentation. You made time for it. You're trying to learn about plain language. It's a step. Number 2, you are always encouraged to ask for help. There are no terrible questions. Any question you are wondering about, somebody else is also wondering about it. So you might as well ask. Number 3, when in doubt, get feedback from people with disabilities. When you're not in doubt, get feedback from people with disabilities. Get feedback from people with disabilities. And number 4, if you find you frequently don't have time for accessibility, if you find you don't have time to do accessibility work, to make things accessible, ask yourself, what are you making time for instead? I want to thank you for your time. I want to let you know that this presentation is licensed under Creative Commons by NCSA. What that means is that you are free to share it and you're free to remix it for non-commercial use, as long as you give us credit.